Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all their support. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from the Commander's Core studio. Welcome to the show. Now, I've already said this a few times, but I'm incredibly impressed by the uncommon commanders in Kaldheim. If you haven't seen my earliest episode today on Finn the Fangbearer, it is an incredibly powerful uncommon commander for only 2 mana that deals with Death Touch and Poison counters. And the uncommon commander in this episode is no different. I mean, it's a different card, but it's really powerful. You know what I mean. But before we jump into that card, a quick spoiler warning. So if you're not here for Kaldheim spoilers, maybe go check out another one of my episodes. Perhaps it's time for you to watch my Vega deck tech. Get it? Because she deals with time? Like ending the turn? No? Okay. Let's jump into it. And the spoiler that I'm going to be talking about in this episode is the incredible draw engine, Vega the Watcher. This commander was actually spoiled a few days ago, and I've been working really hard to catch up so that I can get to it. The spoilers just keep coming, so it's taken quite a while. Regardless, let's get into this commander. Vega is a 2/2 bird spirit with flying that costs 1 white blue. It has whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, draw a card. This is a draw engine commander that a lot of people are sleeping on. There are a ton of exciting cards in this set, yes, but I haven't really seen any chatter around this one. If a commander ever has the text, whenever blank, draw a card, that's usually a good sign that it's going to be a powerful commander. Now, there are certain mechanics that might come to mind at first that might work really well with this commander. But the more that you dig into this commander, the more cards and the more mechanics you find that work really well with it. You can essentially build a deck around this where every single one of your spells can be a cantrip. You're going to be drawing an absurd amount of spells in a turn and throughout the game. And drawing cards is one of the most powerful things that you can do in Commander. This commander comes down early and provides an absurd amount of card advantage throughout the game. Again, this unassuming, uncommon commander might not seem all that special, but there's a lot of potential there. And in Magic, there's a ton of cool ways to cast spells from outside your hand. So now let's take a somewhat quick look at some mechanics that work really well with Vega. Now, most likely the reason that this commander showed up in this set is because there's actually a new mechanic that works really well with it. And that would be the Foretell mechanic, which you can see on cards like Saw It Coming, Mystic Reflection, and Glorious Guardian. I'm not going to get into too much detail on all these cards because I've actually done an episode on each one, so go ahead and check those out if you haven't seen them yet. But basically with Foretell, during your turn you pay 2, and then you exile the card from your hand face down and you cast it on a later turn for its Foretell cost. So essentially you know what that card is, but your opponents don't. But whenever you Foretell a card, all your opponents are going to think it Saw It Coming, which is the Foretell counterspell, so they're all going to make misplays and play around it, even if it's not that card. Now this isn't the case for all Foretell cards, but on the turn that you cast it for its Foretell cost, usually you're getting a discount. And then again with Vega, you're also going to be drawing a card. Another mechanic that works really well with Vega is an oldie but a goodie with Flashback. So a Flashback card like Deep Analysis we can cast from our graveyard by paying its Flashback cost and then we exile it. So we can essentially get 2 uses out of the card by casting it once from our hand and once in our graveyard. Or with a card like Deep Analysis, if we've got another way to get it into our graveyard, we can actually cast it for cheaper. Now Flashback costs aren't always cheaper, but many are. And again, since we're flashing it back out of our graveyard, Vega's gonna draw us a card. And 2 mana and 3 life for 3 cards is a fantastic deal. A more recent mechanic than Flashback, but somewhat similar, is Jumpstart. With a Jumpstart card, we can cast it from our graveyard by discarding a card in addition to paying its other cost, then we exile the card. So unlike with Flashback, with Jumpstart, we're paying the exact same mana cost, but we also have to discard a card. So Jumpstart is another great way to draw with Vega. Next up, let's talk about the mechanic Suspend, which I'm going to demonstrate with one of my favorite cards, Chronomantic Escape. This card does a lot of work in a deck like my Feldergriff deck. Anyways, Chronomantic Escape has Suspend 3 for 2 and a white. So instead of playing it from our hand, we can pay 2 and a white and exile it from our hand with 3 time counters on it. And then at the beginning of our upkeep, we remove a time counter. And when the last time counter is removed, we cast without paying its mana cost. So essentially, it's a delayed spell for a discount. Now, most Suspend cards you just cast and then you're done with. But Chronomantic Escape is going to be fantastic in a deck like Vega because it says this. Until your next turn, creatures can't attack you, exile Chronomantic Escape with 3 time counters on it. So this card essentially resuspends itself. So with Vega, essentially every 3 turns we get a fog and we draw a card. For just a 3 mana investment, that's a fantastic deal. And speaking of a repeatable effect, let's talk about Retrace. Retrace means that we can cast this card from our graveyard by discarding a land card in addition to paying its other cost. So this is basically Jumpstart, but without the exile. So as long as we can keep discarding land cards, we can keep casting this over and over and over again just by paying its mana cost. And again, this deck is going to have absolutely no problems when it comes to drawing a ton of cards. Up next though, let's talk about Rebound. Rebound, as demonstrated on Emerge Unscathed, says if you cast a spell from your hand, exile it as it resolves. At the beginning of your next upkeep, you may cast this card from exile without paying its mana cost. So essentially we cast it the first time to give target creature we control protection from the color of our choice until end of turn. So this is a fantastic way to protect our commander for just 1 mana. And then at the beginning of our next upkeep, we can cast it from exile for free. So thanks to Vega, we're also drawing a card. So we just have to pay once, we cast the spell twice, and we draw a card. And there's even an enchantment that you might want to consider as well with Cast Through Time that gives all of our instant sorcery spells we control rebound. Again, it depends on how you're building your deck, but this could be a great inclusion. Next up, let's talk about Aftermath, which is demonstrated on Commit to Memory. Basically, a card like this has 2 halves. The top half you can cast from your hand, and the bottom half you're only able to cast from your graveyard. It's pretty straightforward, and these Aftermath spells can be very powerful. Next up is the Escape mechanic from Theros, which works similarly to some of the other ones that we've talked about. Escape cards we can cast from our graveyard by paying its escape cost. Again, it didn't say exile, so we can keep doing it. So Glimpse of Freedom has an escape cost of 2 and a blue, exile 5 other cards from your graveyard. So if we've got the mana and the cards to exile, we can keep doing this. Another option is Adventure. Basically, you cast the Adventure spell, and then you can cast the creature later from exile. So we can get a good amount of value out of these cards, and again, when we do that, we draw a card. Another mechanic to consider is Cascade. Cascade says when you cast this spell, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card that costs less. You may cast it without paying its mana cost. Put the exiled cards on the bottom of your library in a random order. Basically, we cast something random off the top that costs less than the spell we just cast. And since we're casting it from exile, again with Vega, we draw a card. And the last mechanic that I want to tackle is Madness, which you can see on Obsessive Search. Basically, you can cast this card for its Madness cost when you discard it from your hand. Now, some of these mechanics are more effective or less effective with Vega, but it really depends on what direction you take the deck. And there's actually certain cards that can help you out in a different way. And much like Vega, some of these cards can provide you an absurd amount of card advantage throughout the game. For example, let's take a look at Precognition Field. It's an enchantment for 3 and a blue, and it says you may look at the top card of your library. You may cast the top card of your library if it's an instant or sorcery card. And we can also pay 3 to exile the top card of our library. This kind of a deck is going to be running an absurd number of instants and sorceries. So there's going to be a lot of times when the top is an instant or sorcery, and we can cast it from there. And again, when we do that, since we're not casting it from our hand, Vega's going to draw us a card. Another version of this, Future Sight. It says play the top card of your library revealed. You may play the top card of your library. So this not only lets us play lands, but lets us cast anything off the top. And again, Vega is really happy about that. Now, there are plenty of cards outside the mechanics that can cast spells outside of your hand. So let's just go through a couple to give you some examples. First up, Talent of the Telepath says, target opponent reveals the top 7 cards of their library. You may cast an instant or sorcery spell from among them without paying its mana cost. Then that player puts the rest into their graveyard. In Spell Mastery, if there are 2 or more instant and or sorcery cards in your graveyard, you may cast up to 2 revealed instant and or sorcery cards instead of 1. The vast majority of the time in this deck, you're going to have Spell Mastery. So for 4 mana, you get to cast 2 things off the top of your opponent's library, and then you draw 2 cards. Speaking of casting 2 things, there's Spell Twine. Essentially, it's going to cast an instant or sorcery from your graveyard and an opponent's graveyard. So you're getting all the value out of those spells, and you're drawing 2 cards. And then there's the big one with Aminatu's Augury. It's got a lot of text, so here we go. Exile the top 8 cards of your library. You may put a land card from among them onto the battlefield. Until end of turn, for each non-land card type, you may cast a card of that type from among the exiled cards without paying its mana cost. Basically, ramp 1 casts a ton of things off the top for free. And for each one of those you cast, Vega draws you a card. And another notable inclusion, if you've got the budget for, is Isochron Scepter. Basically, it lets you exile an instant from your hand that costs 2 or less, then you can keep casting it with this. So again, you're getting a lot of value, and you're drawing a card each time you do. And of course, you can do the Dramatic Scepter combo if you want to go in that direction. Now, a deck built around Vega is probably going to have a ton of instants and sorceries. So finding ways to reduce their mana cost can be huge for this deck. For example, Jace's Sanctum can help you out in multiple ways. It says instant sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, and whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, scry 1. So this saves you mana and helps you with card selection. You also might want to consider Arcane Melee, which says instant sorcery spells cost 2 less to cast. Now this is most definitely going to help you, but keep in mind that this does affect your opponent's spells as well. So if you play in a Spellslinger meta, you might want to stay away from this one. But if everyone loves creature decks, then go for it. Now, drawing cards is great, but let's talk about a couple of the ways that you can actually win with this deck. The first way that I'm going to bring up is generating an absurd amount of tokens with something like Talrin Sky Summoner. Because with him in play, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, you get a 2/2 flyer. Again, the amount of instants and sorceries you're going to be casting in this deck is going to be insane. So flood the board with flyers and have fun. Or another way might be with something like Sphinx Bone Wand. It says whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you may put a charge counter on Sphinx Bone Wand. If you do, Sphinx Bone Wand deals damage equal to the number of charge counters on it to target creature or player. With this kind of a deck, you can easily get that number in the double digits every single time you cast an instant or sorcery spell. Or with all the cards that you're going to be drawing, why not finish everyone off with Psychosis Crawler? It says whenever you draw a card, each opponent loses 1 life. And again, with a deck like this, that can go really quickly. Or there's always Old Reliable with Approach of the Second Sun. Basically, you cast this once, it goes back in your library 7th from the top, and then you cast it again and you win. And again, it will take you absolutely no time to draw back down into it so that you can cast it again. But now as this episode is coming to a close, it's time for me to give you my gut feeling on this commander. Again, I really like the design of a lot of these uncommon commanders, and Vega is no exception. Vega is a powerful draw engine in the right deck. And there are a ton of mechanics out there and cards out there that work really well with it. Just because this commander is listed as uncommon, don't let that fool you and don't sleep on Vega. And with that, the show has come to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you, so make sure you comment below and let me know what your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thanks again and have a good one.